On today's Locked On NBA Game Night podcast, recapping day one of the NBA playoffs, the Knicks go on a run to beat the Pistons. The Clippers and Nuggets played an instant classic. The Timberwolves got an upset, and the Pacers got a lopsided win.
When that final buzzer rings, you know it's time for Locked On NBA Game Night. All the post-game reactions to every game across the league, every single night, with insights only the hosts at Locked On can provide. It's the true NBA fans' one stop for all the action. Every game, every night. It's Locked On NBA Game Night. Tipping off now.
Let's get it going on the Locked On NBA Game Night podcast, recapping every game across the association. And it's playoff time, so the games have never been bigger. I'm Rylan Stiles, host of Locked On Thunder. Joining me today is Danny Cunningham, host of Locked On Cavs. The number one seeds represented tonight on Locked On NBA Game Night. We'll have to wait until tomorrow night whenever you're going to recap Sunday's slate, Danny. But this slate was really good out of the chute. We had a lot of interesting games, and then it was bookended by two games that were decided in the final moments, in the sense of it was a lopsided game in the final moments. But Danny, ultimately, great to have playoff basketball back.
Dude, it's the best. I was so excited all week for today, and the play-in was, I think, a nice little appetizer, right? Like, we got to see a couple of close games, Miami and Atlanta going to overtime on Friday night, but the real deal finally got here on Saturday. Could not have been more excited. Obviously, game one wasn't all that close between Milwaukee and Indy, but man, game two between Denver and LA was awesome, and there's so many great things to talk about from this day.
Yeah, the play-in tournament was kind of like a bad batch of salsa. Like, it's still good as an appetizer. It's fine. But it wasn't just something to die for. And then tonight we got the entree of these four great games, the main course of which was the LA Clippers going up against the Denver Nuggets. And again, that the Denver Nuggets had to rally from behind to get a 112-110 win over the Clippers in OT. And they defended home court in game one. Clippers once led by 15 points. In this game, there was 11 lead changes, 7 ties, and the Nuggets were able to pull out this win by forcing 20 turnovers from the Clippers in the playoffs, overcoming the Clippers shooting 50% from the floor. Danny, what stood out to you about this overtime thriller?
I think for me, I'm always, when I think of this game, I'm going to think of the absolute roller coaster ride. And you know this maybe better than anybody, Rylan, but the absolute roller coaster ride of what it's like watching Russell Westbrook decide games. And not to say that he was the biggest deciding factor, but he hit that huge corner three in the final minute of regulation, had that huge, I don't know if you want to call it like a knock away because he hit it off of James Harden at the end of overtime. But like the Nuggets do not win this game without Russell Westbrook. But they also could have lost this game. And if they lose this game, you could say they probably lost that game because of Russell Westbrook. Like it is so incredible, the highs and lows of his game when he's involved in the final minutes. I thought it was incredibly gutsy for Denver to close out this game with him on the floor, especially considering throughout the season, some of the clutch time shortcomings that he's had. That game they lost against Minnesota a few weeks back certainly comes to mind as far as that goes. But I thought of that. And then from a Clippers perspective, it's offensively, they just feel so stagnant late in games. And I thought James Harden did some really good things. He had a couple of really big floaters. Kawhi Leonard, when he's on, is as good as anybody in isolation, I think still. But man, they become so much easier to defend because you just sort of know what action they're going to go to over and over and over again. And it's not as if it's the greatest thing in the world, the way that it may have been earlier in James Harden's career. So that's kind of the thing. It's like, okay, I'd like to see the ball move a little bit more for the Clippers offensively, particularly in the second half of this game.
Yeah, the two sides in this game come out of it, I think, feeling encouraged, I guess you could say, for as encouraged as you could be over a game one loss if you're the Clippers. But it was a down to the wire game. The Clippers obviously had their stretches where they played really well to grow a 15-point lead. And if you're the Clippers, you're thinking, well, if Kawhi doesn't turn the ball over a bajillion times, like this series is different. This game is different. And you get a road win in the Mile High City. And if you're Denver, you look at Jamal Murray, who hit some big shots, but also missed some at point blank range, that if those shots go in, then you can grow even more distance and try to win this in regulation. But the Russell Westbrook roller coaster is a necessity because you look at the 34 minutes that he played in this game. who else would you kind of rather them turn to that did not get into the action tonight for Denver? They have a very shallow rotation, and he certainly brought up, I'm sure, PTSD in Denver whenever he was barreling his way to the rim when he should have pulled it out. That's how they lost a game against Minnesota earlier this year. But ultimately, the big three he hit and the ability to get those stops defensively, those came in handy for Denver to get this win. But the Clippers, you're just hoping that Kawhi and the team overall has better ball security in game 2 and can make up for letting the go of the rope in this one on the margins. But ultimately, this was a tone setter for what I think everyone expects to be a back and forth series and probably going 6 or 7.
Right. I don't feel any differently about this series. And I did pick the Clippers, I think, in 6 or 7 games to win this series. And my mind hasn't necessarily changed as far as that goes after game 1. And I think it's probably silly to have some overarching takeaways like, oh man, this series is so different than I thought it would be after 48, or I guess in this case, 53 minutes of basketball because of overtime. But I think both teams probably are going to watch the film of this game on Sunday and be like, you know what? We should have been so much better than we were. Like, there are so many easy fixes for what we did wrong. And that's on both sides. I think the Clippers will be able to say that. I think Denver will be able to say that. But when that is the truth, you would much rather be the team that's up 1-0 saying, hey, we learned all these, we learned these playoff lessons, but we did so in a victory. You would always, always, always rather learn from a win than a loss. And that's kind of the thing that I'm going to take away from Denver. It's like, yeah, they can be much, much better than they were. I think Nikola Jokic can be better than he was. Like, he had that really, really silly technical foul after he didn't get a foul call from what to me looked like a pretty clear flop, got right in the face of the official, got teed up, which was just, it's like, why are you doing that in the playoffs? Like, you of all people should know that this matters more. And for Denver to get to where they want to go to, he has to be the best player in the world. But I just think there are so many little things on each side that these teams can clean up. And I think that, Rylan, we are in store for a really, really long, fun series in that matchup.
Yeah, I can't wait to see what these two teams do in game 2, because you feel like Norman Powell is going to be louder in game 2. Nick Batum gave you 3 of 6 from 3, but Derrick Jones Jr. was quiet, and he's a guy who's had big playoff moments for that Mavericks team last year to help them get to the finals. And then, like we mentioned with the turnovers, so you just have to trim down. And then for Denver, we've already talked about Jamal Murray. We've talked about Russell Westbrook. Is it crazy to think that this roller coaster was kind of the best case scenario that you can expect from Russ? Like, you're going to have to just live with some of those head scratching or pearl clutching plays in the postseason.
I mean, anytime Russ Westbrook hits a big 3, I feel like, yeah, that's kind of the best thing you could expect. Denver got a gift there. And it's not as if the Clippers are the first team to ever leave him wide open beyond the arc. And they're not going to be the last team to ever leave him wide open beyond the arc. But go back and watch that possession. Watch how much space he has. Chris Dunn is doubling. I don't remember if it was on Murray or Jokic, but he's doubling up on basically the opposite side of the court. It felt like Russ Westbrook was the only guy on the entire left side of the court. He could not have been more wide open on that shot. And credit to him, because he hit it. And I know that he's a much better corner 3-point shooter than he is anywhere else on the floor from beyond the arc. So I get that aspect of it. But I also feel like if you're the Clippers, that is the result you have to live with how well it felt like Jamal Murray was playing, with how well it felt like Nikola Jokic was playing. And I know those guys didn't necessarily have the best games that they've ever had. Jamal Murray is 7 of 20, 3 of 7 from deep. But in that moment, if you're Tyronn Lue, if you're Jeff Van Gundy running that Clippers defense, if you could say, who do we want to take a 3-pointer with the game on the line? You're going to pick Westbrook every time. He made it that time. It happens. But of the guys on the floor, he's the guy they're going to pick. They funnel the ball to the right spot. He just happened to hit it. And I'm glad you brought up Nick Batum too on the other end, because he hit 3 threes, and Rylan, it felt like all 3 of those were worth like 5 points. Like, they just felt like absolutely monster 3-pointers for the Clippers. And it, to me, in watching that game, I sort of sat back and said, you know, if Nick Batum it's not because he's obviously capable of hitting shots, right? But if he's hitting the type of shots that he's hitting, and he had one that I believe was at the end of the shot clock, and it was like halfway down and bounced out. But you sit back and think like, man, if Batum is hitting this type of shot, it just kind of might be the Clippers' day. And they were up by 15 at one point, and all the credit in the world to Denver for finding a way to come back and win.
Yeah, to spoil that, even through the adversity of, like you mentioned, Jokic, it was still good, but he wasn't like superb Jokic that you're going to get down the stretch of this series. The technical foul, the missed free throws, it all kind of went against him in ways that usually doesn't. So that would be worrisome if you're the Clippers, but this is going to be the back and forth series that we expect. And I think that the biggest takeaway from game one of this series is everyone was right. It's going to be the one to watch in the Western Conference if you really want to see down to the wire exceptional basketball. But coming up, let's talk on the East Coast now. The New York Knicks and Detroit Pistons played a barn burner in Madison Square Garden. But first, I want to say right now, but good friends over at Upwork, scaling your business requires the right expertise at the right time. With Upwork, you can find specialized freelancers in marketing, development, design, and more. Experts ready to help you take your business to the next level. Upwork gives you business flexibilities and connects you with top freelancers across multiple industries, including IT, AI, web design, and marketing. Whether you're needing extra hands for a project or a long-term partner, Upwork makes the hiring simple and affordable. I love the fact that it can help you get cost-effective growth. Instead of hiring full-time, Upwork helps you find affordable top-tier freelancers to scale your business effectively. Visit Upwork.com right now and post your job for free. That's UPWORK.com, Upwork.com, to connect with top talent and grow your business today. We're back on Locked On NBA Game Night Podcast, recapping day one of the NBA playoffs. Round number one. I'm Rylan Stiles, host of Locked On Thunder. That's Danny Cunningham, host of Locked On Cavs. Danny, let's head out to New York. Let's see what Locked On Knicks is saying after this big win with Gavin Shaw and what Locked On Pistons is saying with Kuka Hill after this game.
Hey, what's up, guys? It's Gavin Shaw of the Locked On Knicks podcast following a 123-112 win for the New York Knicks in game one of their first round series against the Detroit Pistons. It was a tale of two halves for Jalen Brunson, 2 for 13. Start in this one, finishes the game making 10 of his last 14 shots, and along with Josh Hart and Karl-Anthony Towns, spurred a 21-0 run, the Knicks' longest unanswered run on the entire season in the fourth quarter to defeat this Pistons team that battled hard, had a 9-point lead late in the third. But, man, the Knicks completely flipped the game in the fourth with their defense. Karl-Anthony Towns, who struggled at points, playing at the level against Cunningham, forcing multiple turnovers, picking up passes, knocking the ball away, and helping Josh Hart and Jalen Brunson get going in transition. You can't negate the efforts of Campaign. He had 11 points, the majority of them coming in the first couple minutes of the fourth quarter while the Pistons were still very much within shouting distance. Few big threes from him. He was key. OG Anunoby at 19 in the first half, essential to slowing down Cunningham, who finished just 8 for 21 in this game. I'm looking for Karl-Anthony Towns to shoot more threes as the series goes on. Was 0 for 1 through three quarters, shot 2 in the fourth. Need him to get those up. Lots of pick and pops, but he did pretty much everything else right down the stretch of this one. We'll see if the Knicks can continue their momentum in game two.
Host of Locked On Pistons podcast, Kuka Hill here. This was a really, really tough loss, I'd say, for the Detroit Pistons. They had an 8-point lead in this fourth quarter, despite Cunningham not playing very well, Asar Thompson not playing very well, Jalen Duren not playing very well, because their veterans showed up and were playing extremely well. Malik was making his shots, Tobias was making his shots, THA was making his shots, and while Cade was not playing well scoring-wise, the Knicks were putting 2 on ball every single possession versus Cade, and the Pistons for the first 3 quarters were doing a great job of creating offense off of that. Cade wasn't scoring, but his gravity was creating shots for everyone else, and they were doing a great job of handling for the first 3 quarters. Fourth quarter came, and that just went out the window. The Knicks went on a 22-0 run. You can handle a 15-5 run, a 20-7 run. You can punch back after that. You're not punching back after a 22-0 run. So the Pistons got to be better. Cade's got to be much better. He turned the ball over a ton, especially in that fourth quarter. He's got to be better at handling these traps and blitzes coming from the Knicks. Asar has to be better, stay out foul trouble early. Duren has to be much better, especially on the defensive end, and has to have a larger impact in the paint. If he's not going to have that large of an impact in the paint with the Knicks selling out against them, the Pistons are really going to struggle in this series, but it's just game one. We'll see them in the next game on Monday.
Just game one, Danny, but you and I both experienced this a year ago, covering young teams in their first playoff run together, and the Detroit Pistons in the fourth quarter looked a lot like that young team.
Yes.
In a big stage on the road. And of course they weren't properly ready for it because experience is the best teacher. I don't really want to beat up on the Pistons too much. Obviously in the playoff series, you don't want to have a 22-0 run against you, but it's a young team that had bright lights on it, and they're going to have to take this and learn from it, especially Cade Cunningham, as Ku was saying. I think that this is more so a growing lesson for Detroit.
I think that's what this series is going to be regarded as for them. And I don't want to say that the Pistons are not capable of winning the series because I don't believe that to be true. But you bring up the bright lights aspect. And I was in the room a few years back after the Cavs lost to the Knicks. This would have been 2023. They lose to the Knicks in the first round, the same coaching matchup as this one, JB Bickerstaff against Tom Thibodeau. And Jarrett Allen, Cavs center then and Cavs center now, said, the lights were brighter than expected. And the Pistons, as Koo said, were up by 8 in the fourth quarter. And those lights at Madison Square Garden get pretty bright. And I think that they were a little blinded by them. I was incredibly impressed with how composed, how well they executed, how well they did everything quarters 1 through 3. And then that fourth quarter rolled around and they looked like deer in headlights, man. Like they just looked like a totally different team. They forgot what they wanted to do offensively. They got so stagnant. They didn't do anything right. And then defensively, the Pistons just kept allowing Tobias Harris to be switched on to Jalen Brunson. It's like at some point you have to try something different. And they just got worked. Campaign, as Gavin said, had 11 points in the fourth quarter. He was awesome. Just nothing that Detroit tried. And I don't think that they necessarily tried changing enough stuff up. And maybe we'll see if that changes throughout the series as it rolls along. But nothing they tried on either end worked. And that just had to be such a brutal feeling considering how well they played for the first 36 minutes of this game.
Yeah, and then that's what you're going to have to take from this game one and react to it, respond to it in the proper way for Detroit and try to split. I mean, at the end of the day, the underdog seed, the underdog slot is just trying to split on the road and regroup at home. So they still have a chance to do that in game 2. And they showed you for 3 quarters that they're capable of that as long as they can not have the disastrous fourth quarter again once that game 2 rolls around. But another thing that stuck out to me about this game and this potential series is how physical both teams are, which we knew coming in, but you saw so much chippiness in one game. And these teams have to play at least 3 more times. We think it'll go a bit longer than 3 more times. By the end of it, I think that the NBA will have another rivalry on tap with these two teams just not liking one another because of their similar styles.
And I think that was going to happen because of the edge that Detroit plays with. And that's sort of what JP Bickerstaff wants to build in his teams. Like that's how he builds a culture. And I think there are a lot of guys on that roster that really do embody that. And that's part of the reason why they were so good this season during the regular season, going from what they were last year to what they were this year and earning the 6th seed. I think that no matter who they played in the first round, that was going to be the case, whether it was the Knicks, whether it was the Pacers, a few weeks back, there were possibilities where it could have been the Bucks. I think that Detroit was going to become a rival of whoever they faced in the first round because this was always going to be a very physical, very chippy series. I'm fascinated to see how it goes the rest of the way. And I guess the other question that I have about this is the veterans for the Pistons played really well in this game. Tobias Harris had 25 points on 13 shots. Tim Hardaway Jr. hit 3 threes. Malik Beasley hit 6 threes. He had 20 points. How likely is it that all 3 of those guys are going to play that well in the same game again? For Detroit, to me, it feels like they had a real opportunity to put a stamp on this series right off the rip, and they didn't do so. And that's just going to feel like, to me, something that they're going to regret as this series rolls along.
Yeah, I mean, these are chances you can't get back. And you look at the you look at the box scores and you look at the stats from this game. The Pistons shot 47% from 3 and 47% from the floor. And it shows you just how well these two teams matched up for the entire length of the game until they couldn't stop turning the ball over as Detroit ends with 19 turnovers. 19 turnovers. Like that just cannot happen. And like you mentioned, like you were hoping to find just a handful of games where all these veterans were playing at this level all at the same time. You got one of those games and you didn't finish the job. And that's the kind of stuff that while it's only game 1 and you don't want to overreact to it and sway anything after just one game, but that's the kind of stuff that really comes back to haunt you once this series grows and once you see how the series ends. It's a game like this that you can't get back from this.
Do you think New York found something in that fourth quarter? They went on a 21-0 run. They were awesome. Like we do have to get, it's not just that the Pistons forgot how to play basketball. New York had a big part in doing that too. Like, they were awesome in that stretch, and we probably should have mentioned that earlier. But this was a team coming into the postseason that, I don't know that the Knicks were overflowing with confidence, considering that when they played the really good teams in the NBA, they didn't find success. They went winless against the Thunder, the Cavs, the Celtics, all of the teams that they were supposed to be in the same tier as when they made the trade for Karl Anthony Towns, when they made the trade for Bridges before the season. Do you think that this type of moment, this fourth quarter, could propel them maybe a little bit further than we originally anticipated?
Yeah, I think that it can for sure give them a lot of confidence and for sure make them play better. Now, the sad reality for New York is winning the series gets you a date with Boston. And so it's not exactly a great recipe, no matter who you are, no matter if you're the number one seeds in either conference. It's not a great recipe to play Boston. So maybe not further in the sense of what round your season ends in, but further in the sense of how many games you can take them to, or what percentage chance you'd give them to win that series against Boston probably heightens, because I do think that they found something. And that biggest thing is confidence, of just the belief that, hey, we can play this way. We can be physical. We can get in the passing lanes. We can cause turnovers. We can count on guys like Campaign to step up and find these opportunities. Like the whole season, we talked about New York can't beat good teams, and New York can't rely on their depth. And tonight, they were able to beat a good Pistons team, and they were able to rely on their depth to help them out, as much depth as you use in the playoffs, especially for Tom Thibodeau. But they were able to rely on guys like Campaign to really help them grow their lead and win this game. And so I think that just naturally instills confidence in you moving forward. And I think that they found the level of intensity that the playoffs require, and they played that way, and they were able to get this big win and start off the series right, 1-0 for the Knicks. Coming up, let's talk about Minnesota, who pulled off the upset of the day in LA, and the Indiana Pacers, who took care of business. But first, I want to say right now, my good friends over at Monarch Money, if you've ever checked your bank account and wondered where did all the money go between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. It's your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending all in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building your wealth. I love the fact that it is all in one on the app. You're not juggling through multiple applications to just check your finances or track your spending or plan your long-term goals. All of that is right there on Monarch. So take control of your financial goals and success with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNBA for half off your first year. We're back on the Locked On NBA Game Night podcast, recapping day one of the NBA playoffs. I'm Rylan Stiles, host of Locked On Thunder. That's Danny Cunningham, host of Locked On Cavs. Let's head to Minnesota to hear from Ben Beacon, Locked On Timberwolves, about the Timberwolves' big win in LA.
The Minnesota Timberwolves destroyed the LA Lakers by 22 points in a Game 1 road victory to open up the playoffs. I'm Ben Beacon, host of the daily Locked On Wolves podcast. I don't think anybody had Jaden McDaniels leading the Wolves in scoring in this one, but he did. He had 25 points on 13 shots. Naz Reid was their second leading scorer, 23 points on just 12 shots in this game. The Wolves, they shot 50% from three. They were 21 of 42 from deep. But guess what? Turns out when you hold the opposition under 100 points, you've got a pretty good shot to win the game. They held the Lakers below 40% shooting. Luka Doncic had 37, but nobody else in the Lakers had more than 19 points. LeBron didn't get involved until the second half. The Lakers made things kind of interesting, end of the third, early fourth quarter, but the Wolves held on late. This was just a well-rounded game that was really keyed by the Timberwolves bench trio of Naz, Dante DiVincenzo, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and a lot of Jaden McDaniels. A really, really solid win for the Wolves in Game 1 as they steal home court. Subscribe to Locked On Wolves for all things Timberwolves.
Go check out Locked On Wolves for this series, because it's going to be one that you want to really invest in. And I thought that Ben did a great job of highlighting the Minnesota role players, and I find myself defaulting to Anthony Edwards, because you look at this box score from him, and he plays 35 minutes while cramping, but he ends up with 22 points on 36% shooting, and you think that this was a bad Anthony Edwards game, but I think watching it, you saw exactly what Minnesota needs from Ant. Obviously, do you hope that he shoots the ball more efficiently? Of course you do. You hope he's better than 36% shooting from the floor. But the 8 rebounds, the 9 assists, the table setting to allow for these role players that we've talked about, like Jaden McDaniels, like Dante DiVincenzo, even like Julius Randle, to thrive in this game. I think was predicated on Anthony Edwards playing the game the right way, making the right reads, and not taking over in a spot where the lights are bright. And Anthony Edwards is a guy who doesn't shy away from those bright lights. And he could have came out here and tried to battery ram his way to the rim every single possession and tried to take over and own Crypto Arena, formerly known as Staples Center, and own this series, as he's always been talking this week about how the Timberwolves are the underdog and nobody believes in them. He could have taken that and used it in an emotional way, in a negative way. But I think that he played really under control, and that's a really good sign for Minnesota because you see that his teammates are very capable. The Naz Reid 6 for 9, and the way that they shot the ball tonight was awesome. And I thought that it all still started with Anthony Edwards.
And you threw out a lot of stats there, and I thought all of those were good things. Obviously, Ant didn't shoot the ball as efficiently as you mentioned, as he would like, as the Wolves would like, as anyone would like. There's a stat you left out that I actually think tells the best story of what Ant's game was, and it was the fact that he had 1 turnover. He had 9 assists to 1 turnover, and that is, to me, a really, really good sign for him the rest of the series, because the basketball is obviously going to be in his hands more than anybody else in Minnesota. If he can keep the turnovers down, that is where I think that the Wolves can find success, because part of the reason why, and we can talk about what went wrong for the Lakers, but part of the reason why I thought the Lakers struggled offensively is because they had to get the ball to the net. It felt like every possession. And yeah, part of that is the Wolves shot 50%. They had 21 threes on 42 attempts. And I don't necessarily think that is a repeatable thing. I would bet against that happening again in this series. But a lot of it too was Anthony Edwards took care of the basketball. Now you can also say, well, Julius Randle made up for it because he had 7 turnovers himself. And the Wolves finished with a very modest 10. Like that to me is the winning formula. If they can have games where they have almost 30 assists and just 10 turnovers, they're going to be in a really, really good spot, especially when you're talking about facing a defense that doesn't necessarily have great rim protection either.
Yeah, and I think that another point for Minnesota, a feather in the cap of Minnesota, is that Ben kind of dismissed the comeback that the Lakers had in the fourth, and I think that that's good insight because Ben would know if that's a reason, a cause for concern. If Minnesota typically lets go of the rope in that scenario, so clearly Ben was not worried. But it was interesting because it was the start of the fourth quarter. They get it down to like 13 points, and they get it down to even 10 points, and you're thinking, okay, like on the road,
here we go again with the Wolves, right?
Yeah. Here comes the Wolves. Here comes Luka. Here comes LeBron, Austin Reeves, and the bright lights of the Staples Center. And no, Minnesota responds in a great way to the point that JJ Redick has to wave the white flag. Like that's huge in terms of how Minnesota responds, even in this game that they got a blowout win.
And I thought part of that was self-inflicted too. Obviously Ant was dealing with cramping, so he didn't play maybe the normal amount of minutes that he would have played in the second half. But Chris Finch gets called for a technical foul, the coach of the Wolves, with a 22-point lead. Like, what is that important when you're leading by 22 points that you have to pick up a tech for, right? Because all that does, especially when you're on the road, like if you're at home, maybe it's a different story. But the crowd of Crypto was begging to have something to cheer about. Chris Finch gave him something. And then Julius Randle gets tangled up with Jared Vanderbilt. And, he pulled Vanderbilt, tried to pull him down by his arm. That was a really silly technical foul to pick up in that spot. Like, I do think that if those two things don't happen, and I understand the Randle one happened already once the comeback was going on, but it's just like, I don't know that you should be giving fuel to that fire. And it felt like they did.
Yeah, they for sure did, and they still were able to get themselves back in check with the timeout from Finch, which I thought was a good timeout, but part of it was his fault that they were raveling a little bit because on top of that, you had the Luka Doncic half-court bank, just magical shot that awesome. Did bring the crowd to life, and it's like all those things happened in rapid succession to where it did feel like, okay, here's the run. It's going to end strong. We're going to get a really fun game at the end, but Minnesota still forced the Lakers to wave the white flag. Now, Danny, looking at this game, I totally agree with you that you're not going to see the Timberwolves jack up 42 threes and make 50% of them throughout this series sustainably. I will say, though, that the Lakers are due to have a game like that at some point this series, maybe not game 2, but at some point this series, there's going to be a game where Gabe Vincent, where Vanderbilt, where Dorian Finney-Smith, where all these guys are hot and they have their turn at the shooting variance. And then it comes down to, well, what do you do with the other games of this series? If we're going to cast this off to somewhat of shooting variance, and we know that the Lakers will at least get one game of shooting variance, where did you see throughout this game as much as you could in a blowout game, kind of the margins and who would you favor in that scenario?
So I still like the Lakers in this series, partially because I just thought their effort was really poor on
Yeah.
Saturday. Like I thought that the Wolves treated this game like a playoff game, and I don't know that the Lakers treated this game like a playoff game. And I have watched a ton, as you can imagine, of LeBron James playoff games, and some of them have been far less competitive than others because the Eastern Conference maybe wasn't always all that good when he was here in Cleveland. But this kind of followed the script of a lot of game ones that I've seen LeBron teams play. So if the Wolves win game 2, I will feel much differently. But I think I'm going to reserve like changing a pick away from LeBron, Luka, and the Lakers until after I see what happens in game 2.
Yeah, I also picked the Lakers, and I'm still sticking with the Lakers to get this series win. The East still is not good, by the way, so we're going to head now to the Eastern Conference and head out to Indiana to see how the Bucks got a lopsided win over the Bucks. How the Pistons got a lopsided win over the Bucks.
Pacers. Tony East here with Locked On Pacers.
Central Division, baby.
117-98.
All of them.
The Pacers win game 1 here in Indy to start the series, one that they needed. I argued yesterday with Dame out, with how their playoff series all started last year, slow starts. They lost all their game 1s last year. Getting off to a strong start this year with home court advantage for the first time for this group was huge, and they took advantage of it. Their first half was excellent, up as much as 27, 28-ish in this game, and I thought the story for the Pacers that they'll feel great about, they got shots that they love for most of this game, especially early. I think 4 of their first 6 shots were just wide open threes. Andrew Nembhard skating to the basket. They had to feel great about the shots they got, and the score reflects that. The Pacers didn't get that great of a night from Tyrese Haliburton. He missed all 7 of his threes, only finished with 10 points. They shot good, but not exceptional from 3. Not something that would scream offensive great night, but they still hang 117 on the Bucks. They still win by double digits, and they're up 1-0 in the series. Have much more about this game and the next steps of this series on Locked On Pacers.
Locked On Pacers, Tony East has you covered for this series. And Danny, we were both at Thunder and Cavs practice, so we were able to catch up on this game in quick order, and there was not much to catch up on because the biggest story from Bucksland was Giannis for 36 points, 12 rebounds. He had an assist and a steal and 2 blocks. Kyle Kuzma just put up a trillion out here. Nothing in
22 minutes.
In 22 minutes, just nothing from him, and no Damian Lillard to boot. And that's kind of all she wrote for another team in this day that did not crack 100 points. The Lakers, the Bucks, they bookended day 1 by not cracking 100 in this first game of the playoffs. And the Pacers, I don't think gave them their fastball yet. Like not to diminish how they played, but I don't think that this is the apex of Indiana basketball this series. I think that Milwaukee should be a bit concerned.
I think Milwaukee should be extremely concerned. Rylan, I
try to be nice.
I've been saying this for months, and like at times I kind of feel bad about it because I think Giannis is one of the 3 best players in the world, between 3 and 5 best players in the world, whatever you want to say. Like that's not relevant to this discussion. But outside of him, and I know Damian Lillard is going through what Damian Lillard is going through right now, and I would bet on him being back sooner than later in the series. I just don't think this team is very good. Like Giannis is awesome, but there's nobody else on the Bucks that I think you even have to think twice about. The game was on at the Cavs practice facility in the media room. So I was watching it before and after availability. And then I get home and it's on, the end of it is on TV. And I'm sitting there with my fiance. She goes, "Wait, Kyle Kuzma has no points?" I go, "Oh, honey, Kyle Kuzma has no anything. Kyle Kuzma has done nothing today." Like that was their prize acquisition at the trade deadline. And he's not going to do that every game, obviously, but I just really struggle to see ways that Milwaukee can defend Indiana. That is what this comes down to. Tony mentioned Tyrese Haliburton, 0 of 7 from 3. You're not going to bank on that happening again. Now, conversely, the Bucks are going to shoot the basketball better than they did on Saturday because they had a terrible afternoon from beyond the arc. But I just don't know how they're going to keep up with Indiana because I don't think they can slow down Indiana.
Yeah, this is going to be a very, very tough hole to climb out of, even though it's just one game for Milwaukee. It's just the vibes around this game are not very good, especially whenever you couple in that we're expecting Indiana to play even better than they played today. The Dame jawing at Tyrese Haliburton was kind of the highlight of the game, and that happened completely off the floor. They got no impact on what was actually happening between the whistles. So that kind of sums up the 28-point lead that Indiana grew and the big win that they had that had only 4 lead changes, obviously all at the start of the first quarter. I mean, it was basically a wire-to-wire win.
Right. And that is, I just can't sit here and say I'm super surprised. I was surprised they were up by as many as they were. I didn't expect it to be that bad, but I really feel strongly that Indiana is going to win this series. I think that of all the picks, I guess I can't say that because I think that the top seeds on both sides, like Cavs, Thunder, and Celtics, are heavy favorites and they should be. But of all like the mid-seed picks, this is the one I felt the most confident in.
Yeah, and honestly, the Pacers have played a lot on these NBA game night Saturdays, and it's always been the same locked on now from Tony. Yeah, the Pistons got a big lead, then they blew it. And the fact that the Pacers were never in position to really blow this big lead, I think is also troublesome to Milwaukee, because Indiana is no stranger of letting go of the rope whenever they grow these big leads. But Danny, jealous that you get to do this again tomorrow night to talk about the actual number 1 seeds and talk about the.
Gavin is tomorrow night. I switched with Gavin.
That's right. That's right. I'm glad that we have the night off to just enjoy the games yourself. But Gavin Shaw is usually here with me. We'll be there tomorrow night for you guys to recap. Well, me and Danny will still be on the show in a way, because we'll also send in these recap videos. So, Danny, thank you for joining us. Enjoy day 2 of playoff basketball. Until next time, be good and be good to one another.